Hello and welcome again to Learning Music with Pat. I just wanted to take off from where I left off last time. There are a couple of things I did not mention that I intended to about mouthpieces, and then we'll go on from there. Every mouthpiece comes with a cap. Some of the caps are plastic and some of the caps are metal. I prefer a metal cap, and the reason I do is because it really has a little bit more flexibility, and I think it's more protective of an instrument. But the plastics are fine, and when you're not playing an instrument, by all means, if it's got a reed, make sure, let me do this one instead, make sure that you put the cap on it. It's not going to protect it if it's not on. And it is so easy to break a reed. It's unbelievably easy to break a reed. All you have to do is touch it wrong and it can nick. Or something can happen to it, it can break, it can split. And so therefore you really do need the caps for protection. So please use them, otherwise you're going to be spending a lot more money than you need to for reeds. I find especially with students, they tend to be a little careless with their reeds. They tend to be careless with the mouthpieces, and they swing an instrument, and pretty soon it's hit something, and the reed is split. Or if they're wearing lipstick, which you should never do, they get the lipstick caught up in the pores of the reed so it can't vibrate. The other thing that I forgot to mention is that occasionally you will hear, I've heard woodwinds players use it, that they are going to lip up something. I've heard people say, I can't play it as it is, I have to lip it up. Now what that means is that the reed is a little too stiff. And when it's too stiff, it's really harder to play the higher notes. So what they do is they squeeze their mouths tighter around the mouthpiece and kind of force it to play a little higher, a little louder than it normally would do because of the stiffness of the reed. I don't particularly like to have people do that. And it's not good for your mouth, it's not good for your lips, it's not good for your embouchure. But if you find something that's too tight, you can always just squeeze a little tighter. Now here's the mouthpiece, the reed is on, the ligature is in the normal position that I would put it in, and if I blow on it, it's going to make a squeal, so be prepared for this. Whoops, I guess it's not going to because it slipped off on me, so excuse that. Let me get it reset and we'll try it again. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. You see that squeal? You get a sense of the reeds working if you do that. But if you don't put the cap on it, like this, and I'm using a plastic one, when you put it down, you're going to be ready to break the reed, and you pay a lot of money for reeds. They're expensive. So lipping up is you'll never lip down, but when you're lipping up, you're squeezing the mouthpiece and getting it so that it goes to a higher pitch or a little louder pitch. It is very bad on your mouth. It takes a strain on the muscles of the embouchure, and it's not a good thing to do, so you wouldn't want to get into a regular practice of it. The only time you would do it if you happen to be playing with a reed and the reed is not quite good enough and there's no time to change it. You're in the middle of a performance, or maybe you've broken a reed and you're changing it, another song is coming up. Then you might have to do that as an adjustment, but you would not want to do it as a regular course. That's what lipping up is. And as I said before, you can't bring an instrument down, but you can force it up a little bit. I want to mention the fact that instruments play in various keys. The flute is in the key of C. The soprano saxophone, this is a straight soprano saxophone, that's in the key of B flat. I can take any instrument that's a woodwind, any instrument that I would play, no matter what key that it's in, and play in any key. So if, say, the praise team is playing in the key of C, I play in the key of C. It doesn't matter what instrument I'm playing. Any normal instrument, any regular instrument, such as the flute or the saxophone, it doesn't matter. You can play in any key. Now, you may have to raise some of the notes, lower some of the notes, add sharps or flats, and that's called transposition. You may have to transpose. If, for example, I'm playing an instrument such as a straight soprano, which is in the key of B flat, and the orchestra's playing in the key of C, C is a half a step higher than B flat. Let me demonstrate this. Let me turn this back on. I'm in the key, let's say, of B flat, and the orchestra's playing in the key of C. This is a C. I'm sorry, this is not right. B flat, F, E, D, C. Supposing I'm playing in another key, I may have to raise that. I'm looking at this backwards, so it's kind of confusing for me. But if I'm playing in a key that the orchestra is not playing, I raise or lower the key so it matches what the orchestra is playing. And that's the transposing. I should look at it right. Here is my C, and here's the B flat. That's what I was trying to show you, but I was looking at it backwards, so it didn't work out. So I'm playing the instruments in B flat. I want to play in C. I've got to raise it so all the notes are equivalent with what the orchestra is playing, and that would be C. It doesn't matter what key, you just make the adjustments. Now, every musician does this. They do this as a matter of course. I've talked to people who say, well, I'm in the key of B flat, you're playing it in the key of A, and I've got to drop a half a step to match what you're doing, and you just do it automatically. You learn how to do it, and you do it automatically. And any key is acceptable. But when you're dealing with the smaller instruments, the sassotos, the penny whistles, and recorders, the conical penny whistles, you have a much smaller range of keys that you can play in. This is the C melody, which I have recommended people get. I just played a C scale, and that's natural to the instrument. It's in the key of C, so if I play the C scale, it's going to come out as C, of course. But I can also play in D, in G, in F, or in B flat. I can play about 4 keys, but it's limited to that. It can't do any more than that. If I want to play in the key of D, the key of D has 2 sharps. That's not hard to manage on a C recorder. That's the key of D. If I want to play in the key of G, G is 1 sharp. And they're different keys, but as long as I keep it to that 4 or 5 keys that this instrument can do, I have no trouble with it. I can also play in the key of B flat, in the key of F. F is 1 flat, but it's not hard to manage on this recorder. So you are limited, but there is a scope. If you are playing, I don't have an E flat instrument with me, but if I were playing with an E flat instrument and the praise team said, we want to play this in the key of A flat, my instrument's in the key of E flat, I can still play it. I'll make some adjustments in terms of flats and sharps, but I can still play it. So you do get limited on the smaller instruments, but you're not completely limited. You just have to know what an instrument can do. Now, what difference does it make, actually, to know some of these finer points? I have people saying to me once in a while, why do I need to know? What does it make? What difference does it make if you put a mouthpiece ligature in one position or another, or you put the screws up or down, or what difference does it make? Well, sometimes it's a matter of personal choice, and it doesn't affect the instrument at all, such as the mouthpiece and how you hold the ligature and how far you pull the the reed down if you want to soften it. It's not going to do anything to the instrument. So you don't have to worry about the instrument, but it's what's most comfortable for you and what is best for you in terms of playing ability, what you can do and what you can't do. And at some point, it's important to pay attention to the finer details. And the reason for that is that sometimes the difference between a good performance and a great performance is little tiny details. Now I'm going to tell you a little story about Lance Armstrong, which I read in the newspaper. Lance Armstrong, who won seven competitions bicycling, Tour de France, he was so involved in every aspect of his training, the building of his bikes, that he had control over everything. And it's probably one of the reasons that he won so many times. He measured everything in his bike to make sure that it was the right length. He even paid attention to the food he was eating and supervised how his food was cooked. Now, a lot of people eat pasta. They do pasta because it's a high-energy food if they're athletes. He supervised the cooking of his pasta. And he could know when the pasta was done to his satisfaction. And the way he did it was this. You're not going to believe it, but it's true. He would take some pasta in his hand and he would throw it on the wall, throw it on the ceiling. If it stuck, it was done. So someone had to clean that off. It had to be a mess, but that's what he would do. He would test out his pasta and make sure that it was done by throwing it on a wall. And if it stuck, it was done. But I think that you need to pay attention to smaller details so that you know what is good for you and what works best for you. And you know, anyone can learn how to play an instrument and they can pick it up and they can play notes. But I don't want to just play notes. I want some pizzazz to the music. I want some oomph to it. My mother used to say to me, "Give it some willy." That was her expression. When my twin sister, I have a twin sister, we're very close, when she retired from her work, they gave a party for her. And they asked me to play. This was supposed to be a surprise to her. It's hard to keep it a surprise when you're walking around with a saxophone music in a music stand, but nonetheless, it was supposed to be a surprise for her. So I showed up at this party, and I had my instrument, and it was an E-flat alto saxophone. And my mother gave me some advice before I played the song. I was playing Hosanna in the Highest, and it's a very, very vibrant song. I've won competitions playing that song. It's absolutely beautiful. A lot of runs, a lot of scales. And my mother said to me before I went, we went together because we went late and we didn't want her to see us there. And she said to me, "Don't spare the horses." And what she meant was, give it all you've got. And in order to play music and to do a good job of it, you've got to give it all you've got. Because if you don't, you end up by sitting there with an instrument and playing notes. And that's exactly what it sounds like, and it's not bad, but it lacks something. Music needs to be interpreted. When you interpret music, you have to do it within the scope of what the composer intended. You can't get so far afield that the composer wouldn't recognize the music. But at the same time, you need to interpret it so it's just not a bunch of notes. There has to be expression to it. Some notes are loud, some notes are soft, some notes are staccato, and there's different ways of interpreting music, and that's something that we will get in with time. But you just have to remember that the finer points are important. Now, what I wanted to go into, and I will step up to the whiteboard for this for just a second. Okay, now that I'm on the whiteboard, I want to show you something. When we've been talking about notes, and I've run notes up and down the scale for you, a scale, as I explained, has 8 notes, and we have talked about 6 of them, the B, A, G, F, E, D. Those are 6 notes and on the scale. And I've written them on the whiteboard, B is the third line up. A is the second space up. G is the second line up. F is the first space up. E is the first line up. And D is the lowest note, which is on the space below the staff. When you get 5 lines, you have a staff. That's what it's called. It's called a staff. And you write your notes on it. That B is the first note, one finger, and the thumb hole. The A is the second finger and the thumb hole. The G is the third finger and the thumb hole. The F is the fourth finger. It's actually the index finger of the right hand. The E is 5 fingers, and the D is the 6th finger. Now on the F, when I play the F, I'm going to add this because this is a Baroque instrument, and to get it in pitch, I need both. So if you want to follow along, B, A, G, F, E, D, and I'm going to play them on the recorder now. What's interesting about the B, A, G, F, E, D, in addition to the fact that it's 6 notes of an octave, which is a major portion of the octave, is that every instrument in the woodwinds, most of the instruments in the woodwinds, play the B, A, G, F, E, D exactly the same way. The saxophones do, the flutes do, the recorders do, and the clarinet on one register does. The clarinet's interesting because it has 2 registers, but they're not alike. The registers on the clarinet, you have to actually learn 2 sets of fingerings to play the clarinet because the lower register is not the same as the upper register. Now, these are the octave notes. This note is the same as this, except it's an octave higher. This is the same B, A, G, F, E, D. Just like this is the same, except that reads an octave up. If you hear somebody say that they're going to read an octave up, they're going to play an instrument an octave higher than what it's written. It may be written on a lower range, but you're going to play it on an upper range. And you get that sometimes in recorders. I've run into it for recorder orchestras, where you're going to play on the upper range. Now, I'm going to sit down again and show you something on the saxophone. Listen to this. That's the B, A, G, F, E, D on the straight soprano saxophone. So let me, if you can just get a picture of the place that I put my fingers, B, A, G, F, E, D. Now if I were to, and I'm going to pick this up again in just a couple of minutes, but I want to put it down for now. On the flute, the same thing, B, A, G, F, E, D. You know what's interesting about the flute? You can hear the notes just by my pressing the fingers down. Listen to this. It may be a little hard to pick up. Can you hear it? B, A, G, F, E, D. It's going to sound a little bit different than the saxophone because it's in a different key, but it's going to match the flute, since it's in the key of C, is going to match the piano. Guess what? We got some extra music. It's hard to do this backside too. Let me try this again. See, it's still the same thing. B-A-G-F-E-D. All right? But B-A-G-F-E-D is only 6 notes. There are lots of other notes. So at this point, I want to just pick up the saxophone again, we're almost out of time, and show you how complicated a woodwind instrument can get. All right, this is the soprano saxophone, B-flat soprano saxophone. And supposing I want to play a B-flat. Here's my B. We've gone through B, A, G, F, E, D. Supposing I want to play a B flat. There are 5 ways to play a B flat. I can play it by playing this note, the first B, and then this note, or I can play it this way, or I can play it this way, or I can play it by playing the A and hitting a side key, that gives me a B flat, or I can play it by pressing down this little key, that's also a B flat. So 5 ways. You would never get that on a recorder. You could play it one way and that would be it. But 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Okay, 5 ways to play a B flat. So when do you know what to play, which fingering? You play it depending upon what notes come before it and what notes come after it. There are some fingerings that it's inappropriate. If I want to play an A and I'm on a B flat, I'm not going to do this. It's just too much work for the fingers to make it smooth. But what I will do is I'll play the A and then the B flat like this. I want to go from a B flat to an A. It's a simple thing. Or an A to a B flat, simply just lifting up a finger. Or if I'm going from a B flat to an F sharp, here's my B flat, and I put those 2 fingers down, I've got an F sharp. So it's important to remember that you always use the fingering that's easiest for the instrument to handle. Otherwise, the music that you play will not be smooth, and it's just one of those things that you remember the small details, and it makes all the difference in the world as to how your music sounds. So thank you for watching. We're about out of time. We'll see you next time.